we think fundamentally machine learning is changing the way people consume social products. And we want to ride that wave and build the best social product using machine learning we can.
Kevin, Mike, I've wanted to do this one for such a long time. As I said, I've referenced the shit out of you. Huge thanks to Dave Clark for the intro. But thank you both so much for joining me today.
Of course, we're happy to be here.
Now, I spoke to Josh Kushner before the show, and he said that he has two truly amazing world-class partnerships in the founders that he's backed, and that you are one of them. And so I wanted to start with the very simple, why do you think you work so well together? And I'm leaving this open to whoever wants to take it first.
Pressure's on you, Mike. Go for
it. Yeah, I mean, I think it is a rarity. I mean, we are second-time founders. We've worked together for 13 years now, with basically like a year break, and that was mostly us having left Instagram, us both having new kids, and pretty much even in COVID, we were working on projects together. I used to say it was because neither of us wanted each other's jobs, but I think that's a little bit like a reductive answer. I think the foundation is like a tremendous degree of trust and integrity, and I think that's the unquestioned part that has, when things get crazy and, you're fundraising or things aren't going well, or, just all the bumps that are inevitable in building a company, to know that like you're not also questioning whether your founder has your back is huge. And I've never once had to question that. And that's an enormous kind of foundational piece. I think we both also have the trait, and this is maybe one that we've acquired over the years, which is, even if we disagree initially, it's often the case that after a few hours, we'll see each other's viewpoint and come back. Like, I can't tell you how many times, like, Kev's told me something, and he's like, I see the Mike face where he's like, he disagrees with me. But then, like, a couple hours later, I'll come back and be like, yeah, you know what? I see how that works, and this is different, and vice versa, too. I think that's good, too. It's useful to have, strong opinions, but it's also great to be able to, with some digestion, see the other person's perspective and maybe still disagree, but not feel like you're just digging in and retrenching, which is, I feel like, where a lot of partnerships go south.
You mentioned partnerships going south there. Can I ask, do you agree that when you have a problem, you should discuss it straight away? Or do you think actually sometimes it's good to let it mellow and let it sit? I'm never sure which one's the right answer.
I like discussing it straight away, but not feeling like you are going to resolve everything in that moment, or feel like you're going to, or have everything to say in that moment too. I've definitely seen that, we've done some angel investing, and I've seen partnerships go south where there was some initial disagreement that either got lightly talked about, never fully resolved, or never talked about, and then inevitably blows up, a couple of months later.
Kevin, what do you think makes you so special, other than the trust, respect? Is there anything that you'd point to?
I think, I can tell you why I think Mike's a great partner for me. I don't want to project and say I know vice versa, but I'm often just in awe of Mike's ability to get stuff done. And I feel like I'm relatively smart. I work hard. I went to a good school, the same one Mike went to. We both went to Stanford, both did the same programs. I feel like I'm pretty good at a bunch of stuff, but man, there's a lot of stuff that I'm just not good at, and Mike's really good at it. And I respect the hell out of that. Whenever I meet people who are just very good at their craft, and Mike's craft is an interesting one because it's not like he's an artisan at code, or it's not like that. It's his ability to pick up very difficult technical problems, very quickly diagnose them and make them right is unparalleled. And Mike, I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your butt. I really do mean this. I like forming partnerships with people where I deeply respect their abilities in that way. And where I feel like there's a complementary, how do you say that? I don't even know.
Complementarity.
Thank you. Leave it to, yeah, exactly. But anyway, so I think that's what makes it really special. And then, on the integrity bit, Mike likes to say I have a bit that flips in my head on people, whether I can trust them or not. And it's, I don't know, pretty true, probably, if I reflect on it, but when I'm in on the people, and I deeply invest, and I actually, people don't realize this, but I care so much about my close relationships. I'm so deeply invested in them that when people do things that challenge those, I think it can be very hurtful in ways. That's happened a bunch of times in my professional career. But what I'll say on Mike is like, I even said this to him the other day. I was like, this matters so much to me that like, even if something questionable were to happen, like we push through it and we try hard because like, it's not worth losing those 13 years. But, you know, I also don't want to take it for granted because Mike and I haven't done a remote company before. We've seen each other how many times in person in the last year? Like 5?
Maybe half a dozen. Yeah, 5 or 6. Yeah.
So like my point is, I don't want to take that for granted because I think in new situations, it's kind of like how you think like, oh, if I just hire really technical people out of big companies, they'll work at a startup. It just works because they worked in this other context. I don't want to take for granted that a relationship in one context works in another context and will just work in the future. It's kind of like what people say about marriage, like you have to work on it. And I think that's true in any relationship. But I feel like you want to ask about why we haven't seen each other more in person. I can see the face.
Well, I mean, you got to marriage and I'm very single, so I have very little to add on that element. But my question to you was, you know, you built Instagram in person and together, very much so. And now seeing each other 5 times or so in the year. My question to you is, how does the way that you act as a partnership change now remote versus in person? I'm too interested.
I think that there is a myth that like you can have the same friendship and or relationship ever again because things change. Like Mike and I both have kids. We both have dogs. We both have wives. We both have homes. We both like none of that existed when we met. You know, we didn't get invited to fancy conferences. We didn't like do any of that stuff. We were boring kids who liked to drink bourbon at a local place around the corner from our office. We had nothing to do other than work. And life couldn't be more different now. So I actually think what's more special about the partnership/relationship is that it's been able to morph through all of this change. Because people lasting one company is one thing, but like it's one company and then beyond one company, it's like a completely different life.
Do you think it's been able to morph because you've actually gone in the same direction? You both are now married. You both now have kids. And it's kind of scaled in a similar trajectory, respectfully, to both of you.
Yeah, I believe that. I think there's a tremendous amount of empathy. I remember Kevin had kids first, and you know, I look at myself, you know, as a like, you know, mid to late 20s person where like my friends were starting to have kids and like realized how naive I was a lot about things. Like the dumbest thing I ever said to somebody that was going out on leave was, do you have like a bunch of books lined up that you're going to read during your like leave? And they're like, no, like this is a second kid. They're like, I'm just going to try to, you know, stay alive and see if I can read, you know, like the news of the day. At the end of the day, I feel good. I'm not going to read a book. So I learned, you know, you learn a ton as a first time parent, and Kevin got to do that first. But I think for sure, I think the fact that, you know, we looked at each other post Instagram and we both had that drive to still build. And I think if that were different, then I don't think we would be working together. I think that would have made a much harder partnership if one person was like, great, I'm, you know, no judgment, but like, I want to, you know, coast, or I don't want to do something, or I want to do something, you know, a little bit less intense. But both of us love building. So when we looked at each other, we were still on that same page. But I would say, and this was a really interesting difference from Instagram, you know, with Instagram, Kevin had some basically initial like seed funding contingent on finding a technical co-founder.
I spoke to Steve Anderson beforehand. I told you I stalked you.
And you know, Steve was like, you know, great, you seem great and you're technical, but like I'd be, you know, let's try to find a technical co-founder, and that's where we partnered up. But the process from that to starting was not you know, from us deciding to do it together to starting wasn't contingent on us like figuring out whether we were good partners. We did some of that, but most of that was actually me getting my work visa. So that was like an artificial delay. Whereas with, you know, doing Artifact this time around, it was, I think we have just grown and seen things. So, you know, we spent a good couple of weeks just making sure that we were aligned on what we wanted out of this experience. And that was really important. And I think if we had skipped that, then there's always a risk of like one person being like, oh, I was just excited to build this thing over like, you know, not have any real like pace and, you know, keep it like whatever the different avenues might have been. So building that alignment was really different this time. Whereas the first time around with Instagram, building the alignment was, hey, let's get together at coffee shops and hack together and make sure that like we could like code with each other and build with each other. Like we took that as a given. Now it was more like where we are in our lives.
Guys, I think the reason the show has been successful is because very quickly I just throw out the schedule that I sent you beforehand and I just ask you questions because I struggle generally in life. You mentioned there the multiple hats that you have, from husband to father to running Artifact now. I said to my mother literally half an hour ago, the thing I'm struggling with, Ma, is I'm always failing at something. I'm failing at being your son, a boyfriend, a founder of the media company, a fund manager. I'm always failing at something. And I can't, and it's really hard to get used to. Can I just ask your advice? Like, how do you deal with the multiple hats and probably failing at something all the time?
This is going to be hard, Mike, because we don't fail at anything, do we?
Right.
Are you kidding me? I feel like every day is a constant failure. It's like, even at Instagram, when Instagram was going well, it was a constant failure. I think
Why?
Yeah, it's just that's the way the companies work. Everything's always broken and you're always unbreaking them constantly, and they keep on breaking on you. Like Jeff Bezos likes to say that the greatest thing in the world is that customers are always unhappy because you can always build more stuff for them that makes their life better. And like, it might sound a little cheesy, but like, it's true. Things are just always broken and you're always fixing something. And I think the myth that things are ever just in the stasis of good is totally BS. And what people need to realize is that like Ray Dalio likes to say, it's like not about avoiding suffering. And I'm paraphrasing here. It's about like learning to enjoy the suffering or choosing the right suffering, because you're going to suffer somehow. Choose the suffering that is like most enjoyable, where you get the most reward when you work through that suffering. Again, I'm paraphrasing here. And I like to say kind of like, choose what game you like to play in life, because if you want to be the best at it, you have to, like, if I were a basketball player, I'm assuming I'd be, practicing my 3-pointers, and I'd be running a lot, and I'd be like exhausted. Like no one, like, to stretch this to the marathon, it's like no one enjoys training for a marathon. No one enjoys running a marathon. You like winning a marathon, right? So like the idea that, training is going to be easy or enjoyable, like, sure, I hope you get a runner's high every now and then, but like, you just have to get comfortable with the fact that you're going to be uncomfortable. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there's a strong component of that. The thing I was going to add on the failing bit is, I think it actually goes back to partnerships, which is making sure that in those areas of life, you have one, like really clear agreements with your partner, but also you have partners that will, call you out and keep you, hold you to task when you are, failing in that way, and I think that's been, I mean, my wife, we've been together, not married, but dating since before Instagram. So she's seen all of the insanity. And so, and I was like, I'm starting a new company, or we're launching soon. It was, not like, oh, don't do it. It was, hey, let's make sure we talk about what that means for our schedules, or, how we think about, our, time with the kids and all of that. Like, what commitments do we want to maintain? So having failing in multiple areas while being alone in those areas is very difficult, because you don't have any external signals to help you prioritize or to help you out, honestly. And I think that's where it comes back to. And it's also really helpful to have both, a wife and a, co-founder that has seen this craziness once before. So it's not like brand new, like, they woke up at 4 a.m. the other night because somebody was trying to be a jerk against our back-end systems, and our alarm started going off. And it's really funny how the muscle memory works. I can't tell you how many times I woke up at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. during the Instagram days, and instantly had to be, on the laptop fixing things. And it's funny how it comes back. And, Caitlin, I think, didn't even bat an eye. She just rolled over. It was like, I know, I remember these days. Just go do this in a different room. But it comes back to you.
I mean, speaking of that kind of muscle memory, you both spoke about this kind of combined drive to build. Another thing that I ruminate and struggle with is kind of relationship to money. I always watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, this game show, when I was younger. And when you won $1 million, you are happy. Like, life is done, game over, you won the game. And then I when I was like 21, 22, thanks to, speaking to incredibly smart people like you and monetizing the shit out of you, when I was 21, I was able to do that. And, I was alone and I had no friends and I wasn't very happy, and it was a really hard period. When you think about the drive to build, combined with bluntly not needing it like you did when you were, young kids having bourbon and figuring life out. Where do you think that comes from, and how do you think about the relationship to money today?
I mean, it's a constant struggle, so I'm not sure I've figured it out. I think that there's something called the hedonic treadmill where, you have your first, I don't know, $40 bottle of wine when you're used to drinking Crapwell vodka at the local dive bar, right? And you're like, oh my God, this Shiraz is so good or whatever. And then you have your first $80 bottle and you're like, oh my God, I could never drink a $40 bottle. And then you have your first $1,000 bottle. You're like, what the heck? $1,000 bottle? And then you go to some fancy party where someone serves you a $10,000 bottle of wine. And it just keeps going. And you're like, this is ridiculous. This is grape juice. Now, to be fair, I enjoy wine, but this is grape juice. And you can go that far on anything. TikTok likes to serve me watch. I'm not into watches at all. But there are all these watch things where people are walking around with $150,000 Patek Philippe, whatever, on their wrist. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm like, why? Why do you care? And it's just because everyone feels like they have to one-up themselves. And you're right. You get there and you're like, wait, I thought this was going to be happiness. And happiness for me is when my little girl runs in and she says, Dad, I counted to 100 for the first time. I'm like, what? We've been working on that for months. We get to 70 and all bets are off. You got it, That's happiness. Or just it's cheesy, but the little things with family and friends and, money is such a siren song, but I think we're doing this not because of money. Of course, it would be great if we made this into $1 billion company. It's not $1 billion company, multi-billion dollar company. But the nice thing is we don't quite have that. We don't have to have that as the goal. So we can make building or doing the right thing the goal.
Do you think it impacts speed of execution? And I mean this politely, but when you are up against it and have no money and runway's running out and VCs are chasing your ass, getting you to get product out the door, you have real urgency. When it's
potentially. I think it depends on your personality though. There's a difference between being pressured by others and being pressured by yourself. And I took all these personality assessments, I want to say 5-6 years ago. And the thing that stood out was that I feel very little competition with other people, but I feel an enormous amount of, it's called challenge, which is competition with yourself. And it's possible we would have moved more quickly to launch or whatever if we had taken money and we had VCs being like, what the heck are you doing? And it's possible. Or it's possible we'd be moving bigger on having a bigger team more quickly, but I'm not sure it's the right thing. Because I think we are definitely not lazy. We work our butts off. I mean, I'm in this chair, 16 hours a day at least. It's the only reason we work from home, by the way, is it's the only way to work this hard and see your family. At least that's my opinion. I don't actually particularly like working from home, but the fact that I get to work this hard and have a family life is incredible. And if I were working this hard elsewhere, first of all, I wouldn't work this hard in an office. It just wouldn't happen. But I feel like I'm way off the original answer. But what do you think, Mike?
I mean, on Whitey, I think the question on urgency, it's interesting because it kind of gets to the heart of our partnership too, because we both try to blend these two elements of pragmatism and perfectionism. And if I had to score us on the relative amounts, I probably bias a bit more towards pragmatism. Kevin biases a bit more towards perfectionism. But we both try to keep both in balance. Even with Instagram, I remember we had already built Instagram, and we were in at the time you could have 100 testers on test flights. We had maybe 80 people using it and having conversations. And we were always well, is it ready? This thing could be better, we had 16 filters, are they the right ones? We had all these different conversations about whether it was time to launch. There's entrepreneurship cliches, if you're not embarrassed by the first thing you shipped, you waited too long, which is maybe a useful thing to put on a poster, but in the details, it's a little hard to say, it's well, but do we have this feature ready? It's, I look back at V1 of Instagram, I was really proud of the polish around the core features, and there was stuff that was comically off. Like the second something got more than 30 likes on a post, it totally broke the UI on launch because we didn't summarize it. So you would just have everybody's names. Like there would be a wall of text this big. We didn't do any comment truncation. It was like all sorts of stuff that like, you're like, this is in some ways table stakes. But on the other hand, it was probably like another week or two of dev. And I think, timing can matter, and getting out there and starting to react from actual customers really matters. And then with Artifact, the interesting thing is I feel like the sort of core UI, we probably could have shipped several months ago, but like this is product lives or dies by its recommendations. And so getting the recommendations into the spot where we were like ready to bring things on, bring more people on was the key. So I think you're always struggling with this question of like, are you ready? Do you go? I think this time around it was not a function of urgency or work ethic. I think it was a combination of just more work just needing to be done, to feel ready on the ML side, but also, man, it's our second time around, and as much as you'd like, I'd like to pretend that like this thing will be judged purely on its own merits. Like there's both the pro and the con of it's like it's Mike and Kev's second thing, which like it's great to have that attention, but it also, probably gave us some pause around like, yeah, we want to ship something that feels like it's thought through and is ready, and people are, can use it day one and not feel like, man, like they really phoned it in, or man, like what have they been doing, and I think that was a helpful aspect of like trying to calibrate like how ready do you want to be before going out.
Well, that was going to be my question, which is like, but I do want to move to Artifact, but that was going to be my final question before, which is like, given the weight of both of your brands and the weight of Instagram, the first review of your product could be very easily a New York Times centerpiece, which is not the same for most startups. Did you feel the weight of expectation given the success of Instagram and your partnership before?
Of course. Every single day. I still feel it right now. First of all, we overbuilt the product. There's parts of this product that exist. You can DM people, you can post socially like Facebook or Twitter. Like there's entire pieces of this app that people can use. It's just locked away and not launched. We could have launched, Mike is being nice. We could have launched a year and a half ago. Had we not built that stuff?
Mike, you are so patient. That's Kevin's perfectionism. He's
No. In fact, I was the one who was like, we should not launch this. And the entire team's like, you're fucking crazy. We spent all this time building, like, are you insane? I think that was one of those moments. I think I got Mike face for 30 seconds. And then when it dawned on all of us about how hard it was going to be to both launch this product and do like moderation at the level we're going to need to with the amount of attention on this product, I think it made sense. But my point was more that if anything, I think we should have started with the kernel of the idea, launched that thing really quickly, and then gotten feedback. And what we're seeing now, we chose the worst idea, by the way, for a second company, because the characteristic of this company is that you need lots of data to make the recommendations good, but you can only have lots of data if people like your product and come to it and use it. And there's all this pressure that the thing you put out, like definitionally, is going to suck day one. You have to know, like you have to take this pain that a lot of people are going to sign up and be like, I don't get it. I see like a feed of news that I can get anywhere else. Like why is this a thing? And the good news is that a good portion of those people actually come back every day. And a good portion of those people are producing data that makes the recommendations for the next set of people really good. But there's a big portion of people who like, there's a big effing question mark over their head when they sign up day one. And that's painful for us because we want to build a product where people sign up and they go, ooh, because they did at Instagram. They signed up and they went, wow, filters, this is the best.
So how do you make them get value on day, like if you think about kind of reducing the time to value, how do you make them get value on day one without that inherent data set? Like number one, and like if you think about like Carter, the employee management like stock options, like you could say over time there'll be like an analytics for cap tables, and you get the cap table management solution for free, and actually the core business is there. But like, what's your Trojan horse insertion point to get the data?
I think what people don't understand is we're not building a news service. Like maybe I shouldn't be saying this as much as I say it, but like, no, like I'm interested in core recommendations. I'm interested in the science of utilizing people's tastes and profiles to make sure that the world serves them. And I'm not talking just like Pandora, and I'm not talking like product recommendations. I'm not talking like, it's all of the above. The idea that you can take behavior or data and use it for a person's benefit rather than for the company's benefit is fascinating to me. And it just so happens that news is a great place to start because there's a ton of information out on the web. Machine learning is very, very good at analyzing it. And we can build portraits very, very quickly. And the hope is when you sign up, by the way, this is the crazy part. I think about this, like, people like to think they're really unique, right, Mike? Like they're like, oh, I'm like super unique. I have all these super unique interests. The core thesis behind recommendations is like, actually, like there are like groups of people that tend to think a lot alike, not just ideologically. We're not talking like left, right politically. I'm saying like, if you're in San Francisco, we can almost guarantee you're going to enjoy reading about startups from TechCrunch. It's like not that hard to guess. Like you're generally not wrong. Or if you're super into the Atlantic and you're reading a bunch of mental health and wellness stuff, we know there are a bunch of associated categories with that and publishers with that. So your initial recommendations actually can be pretty spot on, which is pretty crazy. But to get to the level we want to get to, you do have to be much bigger, where my interest in hi-fi audio systems is represented or Japanese architecture is represented. We're not quite there yet. But man, we chose an idea where the ideal, we know what it needs to be, but bootstrapping it, that activation energy required is just like really hard. Now, the last thing I'll say on this is, but because we are who we are, we can get some amount of press, a fair amount. We had hundreds of thousands of people sign up the first day. Like, enough people can get in that you can bootstrap it, where if you're just some pair of, like, this is not a company we could have started at a Dogpatch Labs in 2010. It's just not, we couldn't have done it. So it is an unfair advantage to get some eyeballs, and the hope and the bet is that you can take that initial attention, parlay it into just good enough recommendations for a certain set of people, and then basically bootstrap and expand and hopefully we can expand our purview over time.
Can I ask a weird one? How do you define a retained user? Is it number of articles consumed? Is it number of shares? Is it number of time on app? What's the definition for your retained user?
Like, are they coming back and are they, browsing feed and reading articles? And that's, the core. The interesting thing for what we're building is, even if you join and the social part is, in a very small closed group right now as we like develop it. But if you join the sort of non-social bit, even if your friends aren't on yet, the world is happening, like things are getting covered. There will be something new for you that day. And the hope is, you come back and, you do get, for me, my interests, my non-unique interests. I'd like to find something that actually differentiates me from this particular cluster. But, I love Formula One. I grew up in Brazil, so that's a kind of core interest of mine. Although more and more,
you liked
Americans
it before
love
it was
too.
cool.
I liked it before it was. I liked it before the Netflix show. I love, but then I also love like NFL, NBA, startups, San Francisco news, architecture. Man, there is something interesting going on in multiple ones of those categories every single day, and that's like a different setup than early Instagram, where I think in day one of Instagram, there wasn't really a network there. You were there because the filters made your, photos from your iPhone 3G or 3GS look a little better or a lot better, because those cameras there was still a lot of work to be done on those cameras. Versus here, what's exciting and like to flip Kevin's thing, like the reason why it's a good second area to start with is you get new at bats every day because there is great content out there that you can get people in. Like we spend a lot of time on our push notifications to try to make them relevant, and you get new chances to say, hey, like if you're in a video game, Nintendo's doing something new, today, or there's a new balloon or not balloon or whatever that's been shot. Whatever these different areas of interest, like the world is happening, and our job with this product is help you stay connected to what you really care about deeply and maintain those interests. So those are the pieces. And then once we have, social rolled out more broadly, then for sure we'll be looking at, are you Are you consuming? Are you posting? Are you engaging with the content? Are you commenting? Even within our closed beta group, one of the stats that we look at a lot is how many posts are happening with no reactions, because it's pretty lonely if you post and like you just feel like you're speaking into the void, or how many direct messages go unanswered. So those metrics and it's a little bit, it's funny because there's hundreds of people using the social stuff and many more people using the non-social bits, and you have to also recognize the limits of your data. It's a small beta group, you're not going to be able to infer exactly. But I guess I'll add one thing that's interesting is so far we had a group of how many, like 1,000 to 2,000 people testing the product for the last year. And so far our public usage has exceeded in terms of number of stories people look at per day, that beta group, which is really heartening because you like to think that beta group, it's like maybe 4 degrees of separation from us, right? It was all invite based at this point. So you figure there were people that started off predisposed to at least being interested in this idea. And you just never know. It's like when the rubber meets the road, are you going to have people be like, oh, actually, now that I don't know Kevin or Kevin's friend, a friend of friend, like I'm less interested, and you get to see it kind of play out in real life.
Can I ask you, which is like, it's so hard when you have scaling time, but also the desire to have a simple and beautiful product. It's something that I loved with Instagram was the product simplicity and design. How do you think about preventing feature creep with time and keeping that product simplicity? Because, news and artifact could be so many things. And that, Kevin, you mentioned DMs, you mentioned the sharing, and there are so many avenues. How do you retain simplicity in products?
I believe a lot in this jobs to be done theory, where basically products are hired by the consumer to do something for them in their lives. It's almost like having a digital assistant, right? And you have to ask why your product's getting hired. And if your employee gets new skills that help you do that job or similar jobs better, then you're excited. But like, imagine having an employee who's like, hey, I'm like gonna serve you really entertaining photos and videos from your friends every single day so that you can feel more connected to them. And they're like, and now you can shop. You're like, whoa, hold on. Like, that's not why I hired you. Or if they say, I don't know, like, what's a good example of this? If it feels unrelated, it might work. It might work if you're big enough. But at the same time, it might confuse people. And I think people can only have like enough, they only have a simple, like they can hold a complex enough idea of your product in their head, but it has to be simple. And if you complexify it, complicate it, they just generally don't want to open you. It's almost like in music. I've been reading a lot about music, and like they talk a lot about like if you use certain tones, people will just like stop listening to your music. In lo-fi music, I'm gonna go get technical here or something. Like there's in chords, there's the 13th. The 13th is, oh gosh, every music lover is gonna crucify me on this. I want to say it's 13 semitones. Nope, not 13 semitones. Anyway, it's above the root chord by like 13 steps basically. And it sounds dissonant. And like there's all this data that says if you include it in your song because you're playing this certain chord, like it sounds dissonant and people stop listening. And I feel like products are that way too. They can just grate at you if they include things that are dissonant to the core job. So you need to be very careful about forming that core job and only adding things in when they support the core job. But right now, we're 2 weeks old? We're going to be like that core job and that core only. We are vanilla ice cream, but we're going to be the best vanilla ice cream you've ever had. And like, you can have toppings later because toppings are great, but like, we're going to get to the toppings.
I mean, saying of getting to the toppings.
I'd like an award. I worked so many metaphors in there. There was the sprinkles, there was corn.
Do you know Mike? Kevin's a DJ. He's a DJ. Okay? We got the semitones, we got the scale, everything.
I need to read up on this before I actually quote it, though, because like,
do you know, Kevin, you could be a VC with that knowledge.
Oh gosh. Okay, fair enough.
No, my question was, you were like, we're vanilla ice cream, and this is what we're doing. Love that. Get it. I think the biggest problem I find today is like messaging with companies and clarity of messaging. Kevin, you were like, we're not a news app. Oh, I probably shouldn't be saying that. Like, how do you think about the right messaging for Artifact today? And how did that decision-making process go for you as co-founders discussing it?
To be clear, I'm talking to you. Like, I think if you visit our App Store page, what does it say, Mike? It's like personalized news for you.
Personalized, yeah, exactly. Artifact personalized news.
So like we're very clear to people what we are today. So like we have a very clear, but if you talk to people who, it's almost like if you listen to music versus you're talking to someone who understands music theory, like you just talk about it in two different ways. And you have to understand like our ambition is not to make, it's not just to have like a fun news app forever. Like we think fundamentally machine learning is changing the way people consume social products. And we want to ride that wave and build the best social product using machine learning we can. But it's just so happens that we think like there's this enormous unmet need in news that we can start on. Every app that is successful in social starts off as a utility and it becomes a large social behemoth over time. Now, I'm not sure if that's our future. Maybe we'll take a different turn. Maybe we'll go in a different direction. But like no one, like when they started Apple, like if they had just said, we make desktop computers, imagine how limiting that would be. But like everything I've read is like, Steve was like, we make great products, which is like very broad. But you can't tell a consumer like, we make great products. Like, okay, well, what are you going to do for me? But you can have that ambition. And that's, I think, the contrast that I'm trying to highlight.
I think that's also where launching helps. Like, as I would describe the product to people over dinner, in the months leading up to launch, I'm like, well, people are made up of a lot of different interests. Like nobody's really doing the job of going out in the world and finding you the best things related to that interest and letting you talk about them and like letting you bond over the fact that, maybe you're into the World Cup. We had a really fun like World Cup thread going inside the beta, or maybe you're really into a particular like type of architecture or a particular trend in fashion. And that's a lot of sentences. And the App Store gives you like 200 characters. So it was actually very clarifying to be able to say, and I would actually go out of my way not to call it news, because I think when people think purely news, they think, oh, this thing is just going to be about politics. And that's a portion of what people come and enjoy in the product. But I think people are made up of a plethora of interest beyond that. So, but you also need to be able to explain things very simply in the App Store. And you have to pick a category. There's no category in the App Store for apps that are like generally about your interest and content. It's like, there's a news and magazines on, and we're like, that's, and that is the thing that most closely describes the core of what we do. So I think that's always that sort of play around your full ambitions or even the texture of what you're doing. And then also like, great, give me the 5 words that describe what you do quickly. And you kind of have to have both. And, almost like a video game, like good video games, you start with like, the basic sword and you can't do very much. And then as you explore, you're like, oh, actually now I can do this other thing. And you level up and you go through it. Like, I think good products kind of let you build into, having more advanced functionality.
Guys, I'm too interested. It's the next wave of like social, fundamentally kind of the abandonment of the social graph actually, and the complete movement towards machine learning directed content discovery. The movement from a Facebook newsfeed to a TikTok or a newsfeed to a Reels. If we stay in the Facebook fountain, I don't get killed by Alex Schultz. Like, is that the next wave of social? Have we seen the abandonment of the social graph?
Complete abandonment, I feel like, is a very binary way to look at it. Like, I don't think you're going to see a complete abandonment. But I will say, like, why do we use social networks in initially? Because social networks were great filters. When I say social networks, I mean the people you follow on a social network, your social network. They're great filters, first filters for content that's relevant to you. And the fundamental thesis is that your friends are kind of into the stuff that you're into. And I would argue it is the greatest mistake of social networks in the last 20 years is to believe that is true. Because it turns out Mike is into very different, like, yes, I like electronic music, Harry, it's true. Mike, you like F1. And like, if you show electronic music stories to Mike and F1 stories to me, that's terrible just because we're friends. By the way, like, our social graph couldn't be stronger and more overlapping. But like, your content is terrible for me, Mike. Now, yes, of course, it's like median voter theory. It's like the stuff in the middle that satisfies both you and me, Mike. It happens to be tech news. And it's kind of like middle of the road stuff on ChatGPT. Great, wonderful. But what about all that like amazing texture that makes us people? And that's the thing that I think TikTok or ByteDance, I guess I would say, unlocked with TikTok. They realized that there's so much more to people than just their social graph. And that your social graph is, of course, a useful signal. But to say that that is the core signal, and when I say core signal, I log on to Facebook circa, I don't know, 2006 or whenever newsfeed came out. I can't remember. Definitely 2000. Yeah, 2006 is fine because 7 was the iPhone, right? So you log on and you're seeing posts from your friends. And it's like, okay, I guess that's relevant if I'm in college because I wonder what my friends are up to this weekend. But like over time, that doesn't scale. Over time, that becomes weird when your angry uncle is posting about Trump and you're just like, okay, like this isn't for me. So long story short, I think that social networks need to become less social. And I think that something that will make up for it is this idea of learned association or learned affinity through your behavior. And I hope what we will be able to do is show that algorithms can be used to work for the user rather than for the company. And that will end up being a great experience long-term. There are all sorts of things you have to watch out for in this direction. The same way there are things to watch out for in social networks around filter bubbles and around, some user having way too much distribution and using that distribution to post things that aren't true or whatever. Like, there are all sorts of issues you have to work through. It's not squeaky clean. It's not a panacea. But it is very, very exciting because, every network is moving this way, but it feels like when networks were moving to mobile in like 2007, 2008, like they kind of half-stepped. Like, remember Facebook had a mobile app that was like actually written in HTML and like it wasn't really native. And then all these native apps came out doing social networks. And I was like, oh, that's what this should be. I feel like machine learning is exactly the same wave we're seeing right now. It's a parallel wave. I think that I don't think it's a complete annihilation of the social network, but I do believe that unconnected content is incredibly important.
And I think what doesn't go away is the desire to talk about it with people you care about when there is a connection, So I think inverting the discovery versus sort of conversation piece is really key. So, what determines what you see on Artifact or other things that are like recommendation driven is not, who you're friends with or who you happen to follow or who you knew in college. It's what, we think is, relevant to you. But sure, I'm really interested in housing policy in California. Whenever I get a great housing policy article, like instantly, I have a housing policy group in the DM chat. But even for the people that aren't in the social kind of area of the product yet, we see people like sharing it out to Twitter to start a conversation or sharing it to a WhatsApp group and have a conversation. Like, I think it can build relationships and strengthen them once you have more things to talk about. And then, I have a friend, we're both really into the Warriors, and pretty much once a day, something will come through my feed that's about, some either Warriors rumor or story. And it's like another moment to have another conversation with him. So I think the social component still has a very strong conversational piece. It just doesn't need to gate discovery as it has traditionally.
Should Artifact integrate a Discord at the verticalization of communities, of community building, management, maintenance? Is that the future, do you think?
We've thought a bit about like what it means to have a community around conversation, because ultimately, if we get really good at learning your interest, it's an exciting other kind of area is, well, it's fun to converse with people about those interests that you might not know at all, and it's grounded in content that exists. But for sure, we've thought about it, and I think it's exciting to think about what are the ways in which these communities can form around interest, around people similar to your, taste profile who are either in your city or, also interested in F1. And like I said, we've gotten these little glimpses of it in the beta group, like we had a World Cup group where actually a couple of the folks went to the World Cup. So they were on the ground DMing us, and then we were talking about it. So, I've seen that, and I didn't know any of them. That's what was lovely. I didn't know any of them in person. There were people that I met purely through interest. And I think that there's real power in that.
Can I ask a slightly weird one, guys? But I just did a next generation kind of consumer social network in Europe, positive only, kind of gas for Europe, if we're just being blunt. And everyone was like, oh, well, anyone can just copy them. Anyone can just copy them. Where's the defensibility? When you think about social and feature richness, is there anything wrong with copying?
I was going to say, like, one of the questions you had sent over earlier was like, man, isn't news, and actually, no, you said social. You were even nicer. Isn't social like a bad place to invest right now? You know, there hasn't been a new social thing really. What did you say in last 10 years, maybe?
Yeah. I said that.
I mean, I guess there was Be Real, but I don't know. I saw some headline this morning on Artifact about how like Be Real's, downloads are down 95% or whatever, and like I guess like social gets a bad rap. This is gonna be heresy to a VC's ears, but like I think investing in verticals and spaces is BS. Like, yes, in general, generative AI is going to produce something pretty cool. Like, yes, the stuff like these verticalized, like the sharing economy. It's like, okay, cool. That was a while ago, but I'm just naming these trends that have come and gone throughout the years. 100% of this is team. 100%. Like, you can take a team of people and say, hey, like, go build a new car company. And you're like, cars. But I don't know, with the right team, with Elon in charge, it could be worth a lot, right? Cars are inherently unsexy as a business. And I guess the last chapter hasn't been written on that valuation. But like, my point is, I think almost everything here is about team plus the area. And what's cool about news and social is the general, well, let's talk social for a second, the general lack of like the skills that it takes to grow social things. Like, the one thing that I think Facebook should be remembered for as a professional development like incubator is its ability to teach young PMs the scientific method of growth. How do you grow things? Maybe to a fault, by the way, like some of the tactics, right? But using the scientific methods, run A/B tests or multivariate tests, using statistical power, using p-values to understand whether or not you have significance in a test and whether you can loop your way towards better things in social. Like, man, that is so important, and it is so hard to just get a group of people together and get lucky like we did with Instagram, because we had no insight into any of that until we got to Facebook. But like, my point here is that with the right team and the right skills and the right history, you can make pretty quote unquote unsexy areas become sexy again. I can't tell you how many people when we started Instagram were like, images, whoa. There's this famous graphic at the time that had like money, like amount in exits in video versus photos. And it was like, you had this huge YouTube one and then like nothing in photos. And it's like, okay, you can either read that as that is a pattern and that you can extrapolate that, or you can say there's the opportunity. We've just chosen to go on the opportunity.
So I'm sure you had Flickr in that bucket, which is like the one thing. But my question to you is, I always say the same. I'm a VC in every single LP. You say about questions, everyone wants to know about Instagram, and you ask them all the time, every single LP, where are you specialized? Where are you specialized? And I always say the same as you. But then VCs who are specialized say, yes, but because I only do this, my ability to detect greatness in data, in founders, in founder mentality is so much superior that I have better like detection skills. And you guys want me as your investor because I absolutely know about the movement from the social graph to content discovery. I know everyone in ML, in all of the incumbents. I'm a better partner to you because of that specialization. Fuck, I'm really selling specialization. Like, that's the pushback. Is that fair, or are you still like, come on, BS?
No, I think it's funny. I think the one thing that, if there was a VC that was simply focused on discovering amazing talent rather than like special ideas or special verticals, like I often think you should ask Steve Anderson this, like, was the test, hey, I'll give you $50K for this company if you can find a technical co-founder, was that like him being like, well, you need someone technical, so yeah, like that de-risks the idea? Or was it a test of like, can you attract the right person? Can you team build? And is this person good? Like, can you find a really good person as your first hire? And I got really lucky finding Mike in that coffee shop that day. Like, And then like the fact that Mike didn't go running for the hills when I told him about the company we were building and he was excited, like I'm not putting it all on me because of course Mike, helped build the company from the beginning as well. But I do think there's an important quality in early teams, which is like, can you form a great team? It's why you see so many ex-Stripe people who are fantastic, like go off and start their own companies, or ex-PayPal people, or like I often say to Mike when we're hiring or firing, I'm like, do you feel like this person 3 years from now can like go start a great company or go be the CTO or COO somewhere? And if that's not true, why are they here? And like, that's just the common element with every great team from the beginning is they attract that group of people.
Can I ask you on that? I was thinking this, which is like, I heard, and this is with total respect, but when you guys started, like there wasn't like a queue of the best engineers, like, hey, we'll join your, new startup. And now obviously, I mean, literally everyone in tech will want to join Artifact. My question to you is, how do you deal with hiring and adding to the team with the sheer volume of applicants and candidates that would want to join? And how does your candidate acceptance process change?
I think pre-launch, it's funny because we kind of amazingly, the beta was really quiet, people sign an NDA, but that's only as good as the person, decides it to be. But really nobody, I think every 6 months we'd get one sort of inquiry like, hey, you guys are working on something, like from a VC or from press. So it was really quiet, which actually meant that recruiting wise, we leaned on our current network, and that had its pros and cons. I think there are wonderful people that we worked with at Instagram who do really well in an environment where there's a bigger team, like, the product is going well. And if your individual feature succeeds or fails, like that's not life or death for the company often. I'd say with Instagram, there's probably only like 2 of those projects post-launch, and it's really different in a startup. There's high variance of outcome, and there's time that it takes to get there. And the thing I honestly just in full transparency still learning to screen for is the people that will thrive in that environment, or at least tolerate it enough to get to the other side, versus wanting the solution or wanting the fallback or having a neat sort of like, well, we did a 6-month, performance cycles at Facebook. At least they were when we were there. I think they've changed this a little bit. We're on 6-month increments. Like people would sometimes be like, I'm signing up for a 6-month project. If it doesn't work out, I can apply for a transfer. It's like, this is really different. We're in this together, and we're in this for the long run. And I think we're learning still about what it's like to have that conversation up front and to have people join for that reason. And then the other piece too, and this is a skill that I learned the first time around at Instagram, is tailoring the solution to the problem space. There are ways in which building for an Instagram, not just from a like community size perspective or from a team size perspective, are so different from, our team has 7 people, we're just getting started. Like there's pieces of process or technology that are the right thing for your, multi-office 2,000 engineer team that would just not feel right here. So it's about right sizing and honestly, even for ourselves, like taking what which is, all of the accumulated bits of knowledge, both on team growth and on the technology engineering side, and filtering it through like, is it right for our stage? Like, is it right for where we are? And can we take the best of that? And can the people we attract bring the best of that without all of a sudden like acting like we are a team that is either much further along on the journey than we are. And so we don't like, you have to earn the right to like, run, like we tried running an A/B test on our beta group. And then 2 weeks later, we like let it run and we did all the math and we're like, yeah, there's absolutely like to detect a stat-sig difference in this beta group, you would have had to basically make the feature twice as good effectively. And it was like, there's very few things that you're going to ever test that are that good. On Instagram, it was like when we launched Explore and made it personalized rather than just like most popular photos, like that was a 2x delta in usage. Like there's very few of them. Stories, like, equivalent. So it's actually been really fun to now be public, and we ran our first test and actually got stat-sig results. We're like, okay, like we have to remind ourselves like what tools and techniques from this toolkit that we built up are right for where we are now. And that's the question we'll always have to ask. And it's about sort of going on that journey with our team too.
Can I ask final one, and then I promise we'll do a quick fire. The hardest thing for me in adding to team is trust. You have to trust people. And it's like pre-seed investing as well. You both sound smart. You're both great people. I don't know if like you trust someone straight off the bat and you met them once. Am I ready to give you a job or 500K? No. So how do you accelerate the trust building process when adding to the team, when working with someone? It could be an investor. How do you advise me actually struggling to hire because of the lack of trust?
I think that, of course, if you're going to get married to someone, if you're going to like start a co-founding relationship, you can't like fly through co-founders. I mean, I guess maybe some people do. I think the premise that like, or the constraint that you have to 100% trust every single person is just not right. Like, I also think it's right, like in hiring, you just need to hire a bunch of people and realize your hit rate's not going to be 100%. That's okay. Like, this isn't a like forever thing. Like, who holds a job forever? No one, like very few people. And instead just optimize for minimizing the chance of getting it wrong, subject to moving quickly enough. And if it's wrong, move really fucking quickly about making the change. And I think actually that last part is the part people have the most problem with, not actually trusting people. It's when it's not working, moving quickly, because it's so hard to screen in a few interviews and a coffee or whatever, like whether or not you can trust someone for life or whether they're the right person for this chapter of the company. It's just not possible. So you just got to move on it with the best of intentions on both sides and move really quickly if it's not working.
Did you move quickly when it wasn't working?
Well, I certainly tried a bunch of times, which yes. I think there are probably like 3 examples in the last year and a half I can name where that happened. Yes. And then there were times where we didn't, or I didn't, and I think we regretted that. And it's just a lesson you're learning over and over again. Running a company is just like, you need to be a compassionate leader. You need the right person in the right spot, and you need to like help them be great. And if it's not the right fit for whatever reason, you move on it. And I think that's something a second-time founder will do that a first-time founder has a lot of trouble doing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the second-time founder is like finding like the ways in which you have to go against basic human psychology and empathy, because you think like your first instinct maybe as a first-time founder is like, oh, the compassionate thing, it's like, even though it's not working, we'll try to make it work and like have the 5th conversation, like, you know, and then the second time you're like, well, maybe the empathetic thing is like realize when it's not working and make that move.
I think
Can I talk about music for a second? Because I have to bring it in. I can't, right? I heard this thing on NPR this morning. It was so fascinating. I have to find this paper and the story. But there were these researchers. This is one of these like puff pieces that NPR throws in the middle of like their morning show. But it was actually super interesting about how basically these researchers figured out how much of a clip of a song they have to play you before you can form a very strong opinion of whether you hate it or love it. And they found that the shortest they could do was 5 seconds. But like, I'm going to quote this wrong and I need to actually find this paper. But it seemed like to me, the difference between like 5 and 10 and 30 seconds was very, very small. Like all you need is 5 seconds and you're like, I got it. This is great. Or I got it. This is not great. In general, with talent, you can tell very, very quickly in a working scenario whether someone generally, not 5 seconds, obviously, but generally is going to work or isn't going to work. There's that middle ground with like where you don't know, but in a small startup, I feel like it's fairly short. And I think just like getting a better spidey sense for detecting that in the hiring process is what keeps you from having all this pain of churn throughout time. And like, I think it like, isn't it like Kahneman and I'm forgetting the other guy. Help me out, Mike.
Yeah.
The whole quick slicing thing, right? Like, It's just like, I think in general, your goal as a founder is to figure out how quickly you can detect whether or not someone's going to work in a role without having hired them yet, to save them the pain and you the pain of having to make a hard change. But then being a founder, making the hard change, even though it's painful.
I met someone recently. They were just boring. They're capable. I've trialed them. I've trialed them. They can do the work, but they are boring. They are not fun. They are so quiet. they're not net bad.
Harry, sometimes that's a feature, not a bug. Sometimes you want like someone who's not highly volatile, cracking jokes all the time. It just depends what you want. I don't know. Like in your scenario, if you have to spend a bunch of time with them, travel with them in a small office, like then I guess personal chemistry really matters. But Mike, we've worked with plenty of people where we didn't have personal chemistry, but they were great at what they did. And like, that's fine. And in fact, as a small company, one of our mistakes in Instagram is hiring too many like mission hipsters that wore plaid and really like drinking bourbon. Like that was stupid. Like we should have just been hiring the greatest people out there. I think it depends on the size of team and the dynamic, but like I don't know. Like I don't think being a fun person should be a requirement for a job. I think it's okay to be kind of boring, I guess. Mike, do you agree? Or I like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to like you kind of want the team composition to have, at least, a sizable group of people where you draw energy from them. I think if your whole team is made up of people that you're like, oh, they're fine, but like they're good at their jobs, but they're not like sparking energy. I think your own day-to-day is not going to be exciting, but I don't think that has to be everybody. And I think you can find that balance around, like some people are just quietly executing and doing that, and they're probably not going to bring you an idea that's going to blow your mind, but they're like executing really well on the things that they're doing. I would just be wary of an entire team of that. Would probably be kind of not super fun to work with.
Would you ever hire a brilliant prick?
No. In fact, we have throughout our careers, 100%, and it's the worst.
Yeah. It's the
Mike,
worst.
this is what Kevin was saying before you joined. It was a bit awkward, but and that's the worst. Okay, final one. Would you have like insanely smart? Oh, sorry, not insanely smart. Like incredibly ambitious and hungry, or like super experienced IQ, or hungry hustler ambitious?
I think the different phases of the company require different kind of people. I think you always want somebody who's excited about what you're doing and willing to jump in. I've always been happy with people who have the sort of raw talent and desire to learn and don't see boundaries as a reason to stop working on something. Like that's a repeated theme I've hit. Like the people I love working with are the ones that don't come up, if they're iOS engineers and they start having to do back-end work, they don't throw up their hands and go, that's not my problem. Like somebody else go, please help me here. It's the people that you're like, you know what? Like like one of our engineers was like, I haven't really done marketing stuff before, but somebody needs to put together our Google Play Store page. Like I'm going to go learn like what other companies are doing. Like I'm going to put together a proposal. Like that sort of like desire to not see, your role as strictly defined by like the 4 bullet points that you think you do. That's to me, the kind of people I repeatedly like working with. Now, once you scale, there's sometimes reasons why there are boundaries between teams. Like there's more process. Like you wouldn't want necessarily like your, excellent mobile engineer being like, I rethought how we should do our scaling when you're like, serving over 1 billion people. So you start creating more of that, but especially at our scale. And honestly, for the next few years, like it's raw talent, ability to learn quickly, ability to not define themselves strictly by the role that they were brought in to do. And that leads you well. But if you have only that and you don't have any people who have expertise, it can also lead you down this other side of things where you're like, just being enthusiastic about an area isn't necessarily going to determine that you're going to be able to be good at it. So it's that community of like expertise, interest, and selflessness is like the kind of like core combination that I seek.
After hearing your comments on Brilliant Prick, I now know why you didn't offer me a job. But all good. Thank you. I could talk to you guys all day, but I want to do a quick fire round. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay, so this one's for both of you. How did having children change how you think and operate?
Definitely more breaks throughout the day and more thinking about like, what is this, what am I building for on like a 20-year horizon, and less sleep.
Kevin?
Prioritization, only doing the shit that matters because you're probably going to get cut off in the middle of doing it anyway. So like, they teach newspaper, like people, like reporters in the old days, you have to write the most important stuff in the first paragraph because it might get cut off. It's like basically doing that in life because you might get cut off. So like my son last week was running around. I was in the middle of something super important and he just fell and busted open his chin and needed to go to get stitches, and he's fine now. He got 3 stitches, but like my entire day gone, like just because I had to go do the stitches, deal with everything. So prioritization.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it. I barely get up in the morning. Mike, what's the one word that will be on your tombstone?
Ooh, hopefully curious.
Kevin, what will be on yours?
Always learning.
This one's from Clark. Do startups still do best when started in SF?
Yes. And he and I have had lots of arguments about this. It's gotten to the point where like it's not fun to have the argument with Dave anymore about this. But he doesn't live in SF, so of course he feels that way. And I live in SF, so of course I feel that way. I think San Francisco has been through so many downturns. And if you look at this one alone, you can like draw the line down and say, wow, everything's going to just shrink. But it has been through so much, and always rebounds and comes back way harder than it was before, in a good way.
Have you ever had this much exodus in terms of tax revenue? Because like cash is king, and there's so much cash that's left, and it's not coming back. Well, it may not come back.
That was true with every single downturn, though. And I think the best universities in the world, generally for computer science, are in this area. People passionate and making like next generation AI algos and stuff are all from this area. They all mix together. Literally everything interesting is happening right here. I guess if you consider like Bitcoin and crypto super interesting, I guess you can bet on Miami. Sure, great, awesome. But like, I'm going to bet on the next chapter of companies starting their core here, though I will say the biggest difference going forward, you're going to see a huge remote component. And I think especially for your most talented people, they'll be able to work basically from anywhere. And I think that is a fundamental difference, but there's no way San Francisco is going away as a city, as like the center of great startups.
Do you not think you lose so much? I've just got offices for our funds and our media companies, and people fucking love it. They love being together, and we're better together.
It's both. But basically, bottom line is that I think it's easy to be anti San Francisco right now. It's just so easy. But like, mark my words, look back 5 years from now, and we're even seeing the glimmers of it now. Just all these companies getting started. If you look at history, what is it? It's like it never repeats perfectly, but it rhymes. And it's just, there's not a single time where San Francisco hasn't come back with a vengeance. Boom and bust periods. Now, there are cities in the US where fundamental changes have happened to their industries and the cities have gone away, Detroit being one of them, right? Like the prior exists for that being true. I cannot make the same parallels today for remote work or like any of the shifts that have happened during the pandemic, that you're going to see that fundamental shift to the community here, which is nerds. It's foggy, it's cold, you get to work hard, there are no distractions, right? We only have like 3 restaurants that stay open past 11. Like, yes. I think there's one club in the city. Like, there's literally nothing fun to do past 9 p.m. in the city. So people work their butts off. And I think it's a great center of that. It's the kingdom of nerds, and I love it.
You literally have dinner at 6 p.m. It's bizarre. It's like,
yeah, it turns out it's a lot like what having kids is like. You have dinner at 6 p.m.
Or you get up at like 5 a.m. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
You go to bed at 9. Anyway, Mike, what do you believe that many disagree with?
The SF thing is one. He stayed here and kind of doubled down on San Francisco. I think that it goes back to the brilliant jerk thing, like that you can tolerate some amount of like the wrong person, but right for the job, and it'll get you further along. Like, I keep learning this lesson. It doesn't work. And it's like, you need to cut that off, and you might move slowly in that first week or two, and then you'll go forward, and then you'll build from there. The other one is like, and it's ironic as a second-time founder, is that like past success is a prediction of future. Like, you have to work even harder. You have to like be just as thoughtful about the team. You have to work, to, both fight your own bias of like, well, I've done this before. Like, no, like, you earned yourself the right to be in the conversation. It doesn't predict anything about how well you'll succeed.
Kevin, if you could tell yourself, 20-year-old self this is, one thing, what would it be?
Probably not to worry as much, but that's easy to say, given that things kind of worked out.
It's so funny. I've asked quite a few people this, and they all say that. And I put it once on Twitter, and they were like, Harry, you literally only interview like people who make billion-dollar companies. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. It's just not an equal data.
But I'll challenge that with, I'm saying that with the lens of seeing my friends who haven't had billion-dollar exits, who are perfectly happy with their families, growing them, maybe not in downtown San Francisco in a high-rise or whatever, but like, actually, the thing that matters most is that you meet a partner or a group of friends that carry you throughout life, and then you grow a family, and like, or you choose to like live the life you want to live. And I see people who are VCs for a little bit, they make $5 million and they retire to the Sierra Nevada and they buy a huge plot of land and they live like kings and they're super happy. Like, I just don't actually see a meaningful difference in happiness between any of these people as long as you're just like enjoying your life and doing what you love. So forget about the outcome. I just like, I don't think people should worry so much. That being said, there's a lot to worry about to get to the level of like being okay. So I want to be clear. There are a lot of people in the world that like work 3 jobs to support a large family, and I get why people worry. My point is, if you're 20 years old and you're like working hard, you don't have to worry like, are you going to become director by 3 years from now? Are you going to like be on the cover of Forbes? Or like, none of that stuff matters. So I think worrying a little bit less. There's this great article that I was served on Artifact yesterday about just like doing things that are a little bit more irrational, a little bit more often. And I agree with that. It's like, just don't always do the thing that makes complete financial sense or complete career sense. Be a little bit random. And actually machine learning would tell us that, which is that being a little random on the margin is actually optimal in the long run. So have fun, be a little random.
Do you find it hard to trust new friends? You're Kevin and Mike, founders of Instagram. I'm not being rude, you're financially very successful. There's reasons people want to be friends with you. Like, there's reasons VCs want to be friends with me.
Harry, what are new friends? It's like, if you're a parent, like, I feel like I get told this, the first, 5 years of your kid's life, it's just like, literally everything else goes away, and you're just like changing diapers, going to the hospital, giving drugs, waking up at 4 a.m. Like, what are new friends, Harry? I'm excited for the moment where I come up for air and you start hanging out with people again. Please tell me what that's like.
Okay, penultimate one that's open, but I'm interested. You guys have done the most incredible angel portfolio and investments. Any big lessons from doing that?
Man, I looked back. I did a little reflection. It was like mid last year. I was like, there were like a few either like LP positions I took or individual investments. So I was like, man, like I did this because it felt like this was a thing a lot of people were excited about, and I wasn't. And that like, it's just such a like. I have to keep relearning that lesson. My life is relearning lessons. I think everybody's is, right? And hopefully you get better at like on margin making fewer of those same mistakes over and over again. So that's a really big one. And 2, like, it's such a cliche, but like there's the founders where you're like, they were going to run through the wall of any problem that they hit. And then the ones that are like, oh, actually they're really polished and they came out of, a Facebook or an Instagram and they've got like a decent first demo. But like, you ask yourself, like, the second something goes wrong here, are they the kind of person that are going to be able to make the hard decisions and move quickly? Like, have they had that adversity in their careers? And, or can you like imagine themselves in that adversarial situation? And, again, I look back and again, so much of this is like hindsight thinking. So you can learn the lessons you want to learn and then try to adapt them for the next round. And we've been investing way less now that we've been super busy with Artifact. But
Mike, I think this is millennials. They're just soft. I am a millennial, but they're just soft. And when it gets hard, they've sold off to Facebook and earn $500,000. I've had like 3 companies where it gets hard and they're like, I'm off, Facebook's hiring me as a PM. And it's like,
Harry, I had someone leave Artifact a while ago. And the reason was, I feel like I'm being told to do my homework before I can like play. And I was like, hold on here. Of all the things that have literally ever been said to me in my career, that tops the charts of millennial.
So analyze that. What did you fuck up in that? I didn't mean like in the hiring process. Did you not misread? Did you?
I'm laughing about the statement only because to me it seems so out there culturally when you join a company that like I literally spend my day working. I don't get to play. I wish I could play. I don't get to play. Who gets to play? But actually I realize in hindsight it's a totally fair comment because there actually are lots of companies that pay millions of dollars to play because on the off chance that one of those playful ideas becomes the next big thing, they're willing to spend that. But at a startup, you can't. There's no playing. You just like, you work hard every single day to get stuff out. But I will tell you, I don't like, it's changed so much. But I feel like every generation has complaints about next generation. So I think it's a bit trite to like have a complaint like that. But you gotta screen for people.
It is tech. In PE, Hellman, Friedman, Apollo, these guys still fall asleep at their desks. I want them. Where are them? The guys in tech play with Lego before they work.
Yeah. And it can't be about what espresso machine you have in the office and what perks you have. And like, those things are all fun. But, like there's that famous like wartime general, like peacetime general thing. Man, this stuff's just hard. And that's why the startup process just chews up and spits out people like no process I've seen before. It is just a grinder. Like it goes through people like crazy because it either screens you out because it's too hard work-wise, like it's just the trade-offs are too crazy, or the volatility and the emotions are too much. Like the volatility and the like, we're going to succeed, oh, we're going to fail, oh, we're going to succeed, oh, we're going to fail, and like not knowing what is true. That volatility can kill people, not literally, but like it can just chew them out and spit them out, right? Like you need to be okay with the fact that like this stuff happens. But Mike and I have the like amazing advantage of like literally having felt this way before and just knowing there's a saying in flying. I learned to fly after leaving Instagram, but just like trust the instruments. Like if it says you're sinking, you're sinking. Don't think about how you feel because you're going to feel you're leaning left or you're rising or you're falling. Like if you've ever been in a plane with the window down and you feel something, you're like, ew, that feels weird. Just trust the instruments. And like, my God, we have instruments, dashboards, etc. Just trust the instruments. Forget about what people are saying. Forget about what issue you had yesterday with the server. Trust the instruments. And it doesn't make it any easier. You're looking at it and you're like, Mike, let's trust the instruments. And you're like, I don't want to. It doesn't feel good. But if you just learn to trust the instruments, you'll be okay.
Analyzing my love life, I don't trust my but the bull market means that actually tech was get rich quick. It meant that people could survive in startups. They were cushy. They were shit.
Mike Maples has the best term for this. He calls them ZIFs, zero interest founders, and I love it. I don't know if I'm like stealing that from him, but like zero interest founders, it's amazing. It's like you've only experienced life in the zero interest market environment. Everything's free, capital is flowing, everything's great. Man, there's a reason why people who have seen things in history like do better than those who are seeing things for the first time, because you start to learn there are patterns. And excesses, I mean, Mike, you were like, oh, like if I've done investments that feel trendy or hip, and I was like, literally every VC's crypto portfolio, literally all of them, right? Like people are like, I don't know, but it's blockchain, so I'm going to throw money at it. And it turns out that like some companies might actually succeed and do very, very well in that category. But you need to be careful about one, riding these trends, and two, just like extrapolating the present. Because zero interest doesn't last forever. And then all of a sudden, musical chairs, like music's over, just take your seat. There's not one left for you. But that's why having this advantage of being through these cycles before, it helps. But man, you make the same mistake over and over again, even though you've been through it before. But you're quicker to fix it because you know you're making a mistake.
Yeah.
Mike, how do you know when Kevin's middle-aged? When he goes, espresso machines, that's all fun stuff. He's like,
I had an espresso machine on our first Instagram office. That was like the first big purchase I made. Remember, Mike?
Absolutely. We had it in there. We had a copy. He taught us how to pull a good espresso shot.
They're so
things you lose in remote work.
I love that. Listen, guys, final one, because I've taken up so much of your time. Next 5 years for you with Artifact. If we do this in 2028, what do you want Artifact to be?
I would love for it to be among a portfolio of products solving the kind of fundamental question of how do we help technology serve you and tailored to you and make sense of the, craziness of the world and, the complexity of the world in a way that makes things feel fun and simple and tailor-made.
Kevin?
I'm going to only talk about Artifact and forget about all the other stuff that I want to do because Mike just covered it. For Artifact specifically, I want a world where publishers trust technology companies, or at least this technology company, where there's a partnership where it's, I'm going to say win-win is a cheesy term, but like where we build something great and we're able to support the publishing industry, but also maybe spawn an entire generation of independent publishers and give them access to a large audience and to publish to a world that they wouldn't have been able to publish to otherwise. And we create a system where people look at algorithms and portraits and all this stuff, not with a skeptical eye, but with an excited, with excitement, and they see what it can do for them. But man, if there were two rivers to swim hard against, it would be trusting algorithms and the news industry, just like all the challenges. But you don't take on small challenges when you're a second-time founder. So I'm excited to go after it. And I think it'll take at least 5 years to get even close to that point.
Guys, honestly, I'm sorry because you saw the schedule and you were like, what the fuck, Harry? That was nothing to do with it. That's why I do that. I've loved this. Thank you both for being so great. I honestly so appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. It was fun to be here.
You are stars.